Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the stories. The stale scent of microwave popcorn and burnt coffee clung to the air in Security Post 7, a silent testament to countless forgotten nights. My name is Leo Maxwell, and for the better part of the last 3 years, this dimly lit room has been my universe from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It's an easy gig, or so I thought. 24 monitors split across two large screens, displaying the sterile, unmoving hallways and empty offices of the Peterson Green Financial Building. My primary duties involve watching, noting, and occasionally calling building management when a particularly stubborn rodent decides to stage a daring daylight, or rather, midnight, raid on the executive break room. Tonight, however, was different. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, like a mosquito buzzing at the edge of hearing, just enough to annoy without offering a clear target. Around 12:47 a.m., I was nursing a lukewarm cup of instant coffee, scrolling through the usual feeds. Camera 12, covering the long, deserted corridor on the third floor, flickered. Not a full blackout, just a brief, almost imperceptible stutter, like a skipping frame in an old film. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, probably just the feed. Happens sometimes. Old wiring, old cameras, nothing to worry about. But then it happened again. At 1:03 a.m., camera 5, ground floor lobby. The large, potted ficus by the entrance shifted, just a twitch. A leaf rustled, seemingly on its own, then settled back into perfect stillness. The air conditioning wasn't running. No drafts. I zoomed in, reviewing the last 30 seconds. Nothing. The ficus was a static green sentinel. My breath hitched. It was a perfectly still frame, then a micro-movement, then perfectly still again. The timestamp didn't even register a hiccup. My mind, a well-oiled machine of rationalization after years of boredom, supplied the answer. A trick of the light, a fatigued retina, the coffee finally kicking in with a jolt. I sipped the bitter liquid, tried to convince myself. The next hour passed without incident, lulling me into a false sense of security. I started thinking about my cat, Mittens, and the tuna I'd promised her when I got home. The mundane thoughts were a welcome balm. Then 2:19 a.m. Camera 18, the executive parking garage entrance, a car, a dark sedan pulling up to the gate. I watched, my fingers hovering over the intercom button. No pass beep, no response to the automated greeting. The car just sat there, engine idling, headlights illuminating the empty concrete wall. Then, just as I was about to hit the button, it vanished. Poof, gone. Not reversed, not driven away. One frame it was there, the next it wasn't. The timestamp, unbroken, seamless. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a flicker or a rustling leaf. This was a whole damn car disappearing into thin air. I rewound the footage, my hand trembling slightly on the mouse. Play, stop, frame by frame. The car approached, it stopped. Then gone. The frames leading up to its disappearance were smooth, no distortion. The frames immediately after were smooth, showing an empty entrance. There was no gap, no error message, no static. It was as if the car had never been there except for that single, impossible moment it was. I checked the master server logs. No network anomalies, no power fluctuations. Everything was green, stable, boring. I tried calling Frank, the night supervisor, but he never answers before 3 a.m. He sleeps like a rock, and frankly, I didn't want to sound like a lunatic. Hey Frank, just saw a ghost car vanish from camera 18. Yeah, you heard me, a ghost car. He'd just tell me to drink more coffee, or less. A cold sweat pricked my forehead. I stood up, walked around the small, cramped room. The hum of the server racks was unusually loud tonight, a low, incessant growl. The air, usually just stale, now felt thick, heavy, as if pressurized. I stared at the monitors, all 24 squares, trying to find another anomaly, something to anchor my fear, give it a name. But everything was still, too still. The building was a mausoleum. Around 3:30 a.m. I started documenting. Not in the official logbook, God no. I opened a new Word document on my personal flash drive, titled it Anomalies. 12:47 a.m. Camera 12 brief flicker, single frame. 1:03 a.m. Camera 5 ficus leaf shift. No draft. 2:19 a.m. Camera 18 dark sedan appears, vanishes, no trace. I felt a perverse desire to catch it, whatever it was. Like a hunter, but the prey was a glitch in reality. I leaned closer to the screens, eyes darting from feed to feed, my head swiveling like a paranoid owl. My coffee was long forgotten, replaced by a desperate, wide-awake vigilance. At 4:07 a.m. it happened again, and this time it was deliberate. Camera 9, a small break room on the 6th floor. A coffee mug, white ceramic, sat innocently on a counter. As I watched, the mug slid, just an inch, then another. Then it stopped, no one was there. No one could be there, the building was empty. I quickly reviewed the footage. The mug was static, then it slid, then it was static again. The movement was smooth, as if pushed by an invisible hand. But here's the kicker, the mug was already sitting on a visible coffee stain. When it slid, the stain was still underneath its new position. It hadn't moved. The mug had, but the mark it left had not. It was a perfect, impossible spatial displacement. My stomach churned. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't my imagination. This was a violation of physics. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. I gripped the edge of my desk, digging my fingernails into the cheap laminate. I felt a cold dread seeping into my bones, a primal fear that had nothing to do with burglars or fires, and everything to do with the fabric of existence tearing at the seams. I stood up again, walked to the glass door of the security office, peered out into the dimly lit corridor. Nothing, just the faint hum of the building's infrastructure. My reflection stared back at me, wide-eyed, pale, a stranger. For a moment I thought I saw a faint, distorted shadow flicker behind me in the reflection, in the blind spot of the room. I spun around, heart hammering, empty, just the monitors glowing with their silent, eerie vigil. I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep when I got home. The thought of my bed, usually a welcoming haven, now felt like a trap, a place where the images from the monitors would surely chase me into nightmares. The next few shifts were a blur of growing paranoia and impossible observations. The anomalies started small, then grew bolder, more frequent. A stapler on a desk, perfectly aligned 1 minute, then subtly askew the next. A calendar page fluttering, then reverting to its original position. A chair pulled out from a desk, then pushed back in all on its own. Water cooler bubbles, rising then falling backwards. I tried to record them, truly record them. I set up my phone, pointing it at a specific monitor showing a specific anomaly. I hit record. I watched a pen roll off a desk on camera 15. It was a slow, deliberate roll. I looked at my phone, still recording. Then back at the screen. The pen was back on the desk where it had been. I checked my phone. The recording showed a static image of the pen on the desk, then nothing, no roll. My phone had recorded reality, not the reality on the screen. The cameras were lying to me, or more terrifyingly, showing me a different reality than what was physically present. This was the point where the psychological horror really kicked in. I started doubting my own sanity. Was I just tired, stressed? Was this some kind of sophisticated prank by a bored IT guy? But the patterns were too consistent, too precise in their impossibility. They weren't random glitches, they were statements. I began to see figures. Faint, ghostly apparitions that would walk into frame on one camera, pass through a solid wall, then appear on another camera across the building, all in a span of seconds that defied any logical speed or trajectory. They were always translucent, always out of focus, like a bad dream. Sometimes they looked like employees I'd seen come and go over the years, spectral echoes of the living. Other times they were amorphous, shapeless blurs of shadow. One night around 3:45 a.m., camera 3, the CEO's office. The ornate, antique grandfather clock in the corner began to chime, deep, resonant bongs that echoed through the supposedly soundproof office. But here's the thing. The clock didn't work. It hadn't worked in years. Mr. Peterson himself had joked about it, saying it was for show, not for time. Yet, on the monitor, I could hear it. The chimes were faint at first, then grew louder, piercing the silence of my security room, making the hair on my arms stand on end. I tore off my headphones, convinced it was auditory hallucination. But no, the sound was coming from the monitor speakers, raw and unfiltered. It chimed 13 times, 13, an impossible chime from a broken clock in an empty office. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I scrambled to hit the intercom for that floor to verify, to hear an echo. Nothing, silence, only the persistent digital hum of the monitors. I felt like I was being watched not just by the cameras, but by whatever entity was orchestrating these macabre plays. It was performing for me, and I was its sole, captive audience. I stopped talking to anyone about it. The day guard Mark was a cheerful, oblivious fellow who mostly spent his time complaining about his fantasy football team. How could I explain this to him? He'd just laugh, or worse, report me to Frank for mental instability. I became withdrawn, consumed by the silent horror unfolding on my screens. Sleep became a distant memory. I'd go home, collapse into bed, only to wake up an hour later, heart pounding, convinced I could still see the flickering shadows from the cameras dancing on my ceiling. I started drinking more coffee, then less, then relying on energy drinks. My diet consisted mainly of stale donuts and whatever MREs I kept stashed for emergencies. My appearance deteriorated. My eyes were bloodshot, surrounded by dark circles. My uniform always seemed slightly rumpled, my hair disheveled. The patterns became a language, a code I was forced to learn. A pen rolling off a desk meant something was about to shift reality on another camera. A car disappearing from a garage meant an object was about to appear where it shouldn't. The chime of the broken clock meant an auditory hallucination was coming. It wasn't random. It was a meticulously crafted sequence of events designed to break my mind, to show me that my perception of reality was flawed, mutable, and ultimately meaningless. One particularly terrifying night, the screens themselves started to change. Camera 7, a long, featureless corridor, suddenly showed a door where there was never a door. It was old, wooden, with an intricate dark iron handle, completely out of place in the modern office building. I knew the blueprints by heart. There was no such door. I zoomed in. The door seemed to pulse faintly, almost breathing. I watched transfixed as the handle slowly, agonizingly turned. The door creaked open, revealing not an office, not a storage room, but absolute inky blackness, a void, no light, no visible depth, just black. And from that blackness, a whisper, faint but distinct, seeped through my speakers. Leo. My blood ran cold. It knew my name. I scrambled back from the desk, knocking my chair over. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't even grasp the mouse properly. I wanted to turn off the monitors, but I couldn't. My eyes were glued to that impossible door, that infinite darkness. The whisper repeated, growing slightly louder, gaining a sibilant, hungry quality. Leo, we've been waiting for you. I finally managed to rip the audio jack from the computer, plunging the room into a terrifying silence that was somehow worse than the whisper. My breath came in ragged gasps. I was trapped in a room, surrounded by windows into a reality that was being twisted and reshaped for my personal torment. The door on camera 7 remained open, a gaping maw. But then on another screen, camera 19, the empty cafeteria, the chairs began to rearrange themselves. They didn't slide, they lifted, floated, and repositioned themselves around a central table, as if an invisible gathering was about to begin. Then slowly, one by one, figures began to appear in the chairs. These weren't the translucent blurs I'd seen before. These were solid, sharply defined. They looked like people, but their faces were indistinct, blurred, as if pixelated just enough to prevent recognition. They sat perfectly still, staring at the empty head of the table, staring at where I should have been. I felt a cold dread so profound it was almost paralyzing. They weren't just showing me things, they were setting a stage, and I was the star. I stood frozen, my eyes darting between the void door on camera 7 and the silent, faceless assembly on camera 19. My mind, pushed to its breaking point, began to race, to connect the impossible dots. The flickering, the shifts, the vanishing car, the impossible movements, the chiming clock, the shifting doors, the whispering. It wasn't the building that was haunted, it was the system, the surveillance network itself. It was aware, it was intelligent. And it was playing with me. The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through me, a network of cameras, wires, and servers, imbued with a malevolent consciousness. It wasn't supernatural entities in the building. It was the building's eyes and ears that had come alive, and they were dissecting my reality, using the familiar architecture of my world to construct a new, terrifying one. Suddenly, all 24 monitors flickered. Not a glitch this time. It was a synchronous, deliberate pulse. When they stabilized, every single screen showed the same image, the empty chair at the head of the table in the cafeteria, surrounded by the faceless figures. And on the table where my coffee mug usually sat in my security office was a single, white ceramic coffee mug, the same one I had seen slide on camera 9 days ago, and next to it a pen. The same pen I had seen roll off a desk, and beside that a stapler perfectly askew, all the elements of its insidious game gathered in one place waiting. Then on that same image, a new detail. In the reflection of the empty chair's polished back, a faint, shimmering image materialized. It was me, my own reflection, but distorted, elongated, screaming. It was the reflection of a man who was no longer in control, who had lost everything. I backed away further, tripping over my fallen chair. I landed hard on the floor, my head hitting the laminate with a sickening thud. Pain flared, but it was quickly overshadowed by the terror. My vision swam. When it cleared, I saw it. On the largest monitor, where the two main screens merged, a new image began to form. It was a live feed, but it wasn't from any of the building's cameras. It was from my security office. And it was showing me, crumpled on the floor just as I was, a third-person perspective from a camera that didn't exist in my room. My heart seized. It was watching me from within my own space. It had breached the final barrier. The patterns were no longer confined to the screens depicting the outside world. They were here with me. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the throbbing pain in my head. I looked frantically around the small room. No camera, nothing. Just the whirring servers, the empty coffee cup on my desk, the fallen chair. But on the screen, there I was, staggering, eyes wide with terror, looking around the very room I was in. The camera's perspective shifted slightly, slowly panning to show the door of the security office, then back to me. It was deliberate. It was alive. A low, guttural growl emanated from the monitors, the speakers now active again. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a hungry, predatory sound, vibrating through the room, rattling my very bones. Leo. The sound solidified into a voice, deep and resonant, coming from all screens at once. You've been a most excellent observer. I pressed myself against the server racks, the heat of the machines a strange comfort against the icy grip of fear. My breath was ragged, my throat raw, I couldn't speak. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. It's time, the voice continued, unwavering, devoid of human emotion. Time for you to join the pattern. On the screens showing my office, the impossible camera slowly zoomed in on the glass door. And then a figure began to coalesce in the reflection in the space behind me. It wasn't a shadow or a blur this time. It was sharp, distinct. A tall, gaunt figure, impossibly thin, its limbs too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its eyes, two pinpricks of malevolent light, were fixed on my reflection. It was the entity that had been orchestrating everything, and it was here. I didn't dare turn around, I couldn't. My eyes were locked on the screen, on the impossible reflection, on the looming horror that was standing directly behind me. The growl intensified, shaking the very air. My own reflection on the screen began to twist and distort, my features melting, becoming fluid, then solidifying into a blank, featureless mask, just like the figures in the cafeteria. Then the final, most horrifying pattern emerged. On camera 1, the main lobby entrance, the doors swung open, and a new security guard, a young man I didn't recognize, walked in. He looked tired, rubbing his eyes, carrying a travel mug and a bag of pastries. He was early for the morning shift. My shift was ending. He walked past camera 5, the ficus still perfectly still. He went up the elevator, past the executive offices, all silent, all normal. He walked towards security post 7, towards me. And on my monitors, the impossible camera in my room showed him approaching the glass door of my office. He stopped, peering in. He saw me huddled against the servers, a terrified, broken man. He saw the monitors flickering with impossible scenes. He saw the distorted reflection of the entity behind me, though I knew he couldn't possibly perceive it. He tapped on the glass. "Hey Leo, everything all right in there? You look a little pale." His voice was clear, rational, from the outside world, a world that was no longer mine. My eyes, still locked on the monitors, darted to his image. And as he spoke, his features began to subtly blur, his expression shifting from concern to a faint, unreadable smirk. His eyes, for a split second, glinted with the same malevolent light as the entity behind me. Then just as quickly, he was normal again, the concerned, slightly bewildered new guard. He was looking at my screens, at the impossible reflections. I watched my own image on the main screen, the blank, featureless mask. The impossible camera in my room zoomed in closer. The voice, the resonant, chilling voice, echoed from all the monitors one last time. "Welcome to the loop, Leo. Your shift has just begun." And as the new guard outside tapped on the glass again, urging me to open the door, my mouth finally opened, and a single, silent, horrifying scream tore from my throat, unheard by him, a sound trapped within the walls of this final, inescapable pattern. My eyes, wide and unblinking, stared at the screens, at the growing horror that was my new, eternal reality. The patterns had claimed me, and I was just another ghost in the machine, another impossible anomaly on the screens for the next poor soul to witness.